Hi, thank you for all the work that you've been doing. I'm a fourth-year medical student here, and I'm here with a couple of my classmates. And like you, we recently returned from a trip, but we came back from Pine Ridge and Rosebud reservations in South Dakota. The stark realities there are that these reservations lay on the second poorest county in the U.S., with approximately 80% of the population being unemployed, and the health inequities are 2 to 3 times the national average, including infant mortality and rates of suicide. Despite these multifactorial challenges, though, there are individuals and organizations who are working to strengthen and empower the communities, and for this reason, our group has been returning for the past 4 years. So what is the Gates Foundation doing to help with some of the domestic health disparities, and will this be an increased focus in the future? And also, how can we or groups like us interact with or engage in meaningful conversation with your foundation on rural domestic health and development?
Yeah, our focus in the United States is education. And we have in our education strategy, we have things like getting internet access in schools and libraries. And so we actually went onto the reservation to do internet access, and the conditions there, as you described, are really quite bleak. We have a scholarship, Gates Millennium Scholarship, which Native Americans are amongst the groups that are eligible for that, and so hopefully that's a helpful thing. In terms of health, we're focused on infectious disease in the poorest countries, and so I'm sorry to hear those health disparities, but it's not in our particular focus. Getting philanthropists involved in that, I think, is a fantastic thing. The strength of philanthropy in America is the diversity. I do a lot encouraging people to get involved in philanthropy, and not the specific things that I've chosen or the Gates Foundation's chosen to do, but just very broadly. And as you say, those inequities are also not that visible because people don't go there very often. If you do, you feel drawn in, and you feel like, oh God, I better come back next year, which is, it's wonderful you do that. But that's not a particular area other than the scholarship and the internet access piece that we've focused on.
Okay, thank you. Okay, this will have to be our last question.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Gates, for coming here and for all the work that the foundation is doing. Because of the size of the foundation and the prominence that it has, I think it's taken a very central role in terms of tackling a lot of the problems that you've decided to focus on. And what are my concerns? And I think you've touched upon this a little bit in terms of the concern you have about countries dropping the amount of aid that they're doing or keeping it stable of that concern. And I'm wondering what you think. How is it that you're trying to mitigate sort of the governments are having a way out and being able to sort of say, well, the foundations are taking care of these problems. So how is it that you're trying to sort of address the issue of giving governments sort of a cop-out of saying these problems are being taken care of by somebody else from non-governmental roles?
Yeah, since the year 2000, when we got involved in global health, giving by governments has gone from about $8 billion to about $40 billion a year. And some part of that is the partnership we've had in terms of proving the effectiveness of these interventions and the AIDS crisis. We created a thing called Global Fund, and we are only about 5% of the funding of Global Fund. The United States is 25% of the funding of Global Fund. So 95% is coming from rich world governments that weren't giving in that area before. The Global Alliance for Vaccines we created, we're about 15% of the giving to the Global Alliance for Vaccines. That just last June, I led a pledging conference where we got $4 billion in additional commitments. And so if we weren't able to increase the aid coming into global health, we'd be in deep trouble. We can't eradicate malaria, get these vaccines out, get these death rates down without the governments like the United States, the UK, Japan. Polio eradication is something I spend more time on than anything because if, with any luck, will be done in the next 3 or 4 years. But unless we raise $1 billion a year, that one 30% comes from us. But the other 70%, I have to go out and say, hey, please keep spending on this. So money has gone up a lot, and foreign aid actually went up a lot, primarily because of the health piece. The agriculture piece went up somewhat. So it's only now that we face this problem that it may get cut as the European countries are trying to balance their budgets. And they say, okay, what do we have in our budgets that's non-stimulative to our economy? Well, anything that leaves the country, and that's their foreign aid budget. And if you ask their populations, they think the foreign aid budget is 5 or 6% of the government budget. Same in the United States. In this country, it is about 0.7% of the budget, and 0.2% of the economy is foreign aid broadly, only some of which is really going to the poorest countries. You have a lot of money that's Israel, Egypt, various radio-free Cuba, a lot of different things that get grouped into that category. So the U.S. is not, by many measures, by those percentage measures, as strong as others. So our view is we need to unleash these other dollars. Our total giving is about $4 billion a year. Of that, about $1 billion is given in the United States for U.S. education. So that's about $3 billion targeted to help the poorest in the world. And so that compares to total foreign aid of about $130 billion, of which I'd say about $70 billion should really count. And so we're pretty small in that overall picture. And so if that is reduced in any meaningful way, then it's definitely bad news. So we're doing our best, and any help we can get to avoid that is very important.
So, Bill, I think you see we have lots of students that are passionate about making a difference on this global health problem. Any last words of advice you'd give them?
Well, I think having an awareness of the story, this book, Getting Better, will give out, and I found that very enlightening myself. Eventually you've got to pick. You pick a country, and it doesn't have to be areas that we work in. But if you pick something that you know in depth, then that really kind of animates you, because then you get down to the level where you actually meet the people. And that's when you really can't give it up. So whether it's a part-time thing for the rest of your life, or you actually find a way to get engaged in it full-time, I think it is very satisfying beyond normal economic measures to be contributing to these things, and particularly if you think of yourself as having been lucky, which maybe anybody who goes to Stanford fits that category. I hope you look at it that way. But getting in depth on a particular thing would be my main suggestion.
Yeah. Well, you're giving our audience here a present, so we wanted to give you something to commemorate this visit. So we've got a little innovation that comes from a course we teach called Entrepreneurial Design for Extreme Affordability, that focuses on trying to design innovations for the other half of the world. And this is a solar lantern which they built for rural areas that don't have electrification. And then, of course, in the Stanford tradition, they went out and started a company that's now manufacturing these. Not for you, for other parts of the world. And you see it's got solar power here, and we try to get down to a price that's affordable in these parts of the world. And I think it's a good example of what technology can do to make things better. So thank you for coming today. Please join me in thanking Bill for his visit.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks.